Welcome to this first geography lesson for Concilium Academies. Now, what we're going to be focusing on for the next few lessons is we're going to be looking at Australia as a whole. Today's lesson is Introduction to Australia, and we're going to describe the location of Australia and to begin to explore its physical and human geography. Now, as a starter, on the screen in front of you, you can see 12 different cities. What I would like you to do is I would like you to group the place names into the country you think they come from. So either Australia or United Kingdom. Now read them carefully, think about it carefully, and then jot it down on a bit of paper. If you pause the video here, and then we'll move on in a moment. Now, hopefully you paused the video. If you didn't, you might want to think about doing that now. However, these 12 different cities all belong to Australia. Now that might sound a little bit unusual, a little bit strange, especially if you live near a Darlington, live near a Newcastle, or live near a Manchester, but all of these places have transferred across to Australia. Now that's down to Australia's history, and that's something we'll come on to in a few lessons' time. But it's just nice to bear in mind and nice to think about that Australia has a lot of connections with the United Kingdom as a whole. Now, in terms of what we're focusing on, like I said at the start, it's an introduction to Australia. The lesson objective is to describe the location of Australia and to begin to explore its physical and human geography. Now, progress step 1, the first thing we'll do is describe the location of Australia using a couple of maps and maybe a bit of Google Earth. Then we will explore the physical and human geography of Australia and categorize a few features, and then you'll do a little bit of research yourself. And then finally, you will demonstrate your understanding of geography of Australia. Now, remember, all the work that you produce, it'd be really great if you could email it to your geography teacher and they'll give you a bit of feedback on that. So what I want to know first is what you already know. So using a different coloured pen if you've got one, or even a pencil, I want you to create a spider diagram of facts or information that you already know about Australia. So this can be famous people, it can be about the places within Australia, it can be about the weather, and if you can, there's a challenge question there as well, and I want you to try and categorise any of your ideas, potentially into human and physical, or even social, environmental, or economic, or any other type of grouping that you can think of. So if you just pause the video here, and then we will move on when you're ready. Okay, so hopefully you've got a few things down and a few bit of information about what you know about Australia, maybe a few famous people and a few facts and figures that you might already know. So just to add to that, what we're going to look at is a few bits of information that are quite useful and quite interesting about Australia. So Australia is the 6th largest country in the world with an area of nearly 8 million kilometres squared. So that's a massive amount of land. Now the capital city is often thought to be Sydney, which is its largest city. However, its capital is actually Canberra. Australia has a population of just over 25 million people, which is quite substantially smaller than the United Kingdom. So that's down to where the people live in Australia. So generally 80% of the population live around the coast of Australia. So that's why the number is so much smaller. It's down to what the centre of Australia is like. And we'll come back to that in a couple of slides' time. Australia has a GDP, so GDP is gross domestic product, and that's how much money per person on average. So it's about 57,000 United States dollars, and that's roughly about how much money they earn on average. Now that's an average, like I've said a few times now, and that's taken into account every single person's wage in the country and divided by the number of people who live in there. So you've got to take it with a little pinch of salt, so it might not be 100% accurate, and you can't expect that if you move to Australia, that's how much money you would earn. So looking at where Australia is located, on this map here, what you can see is you can see where Australia is, and then you can see the distance away from the United Kingdom up here in the north. Now you should be able to remember what this line across the middle is. So this is the equator. So we can see north of the equator, you've got China, you've got Vietnam, you've got the Philippines, and then along the equator above Australia, so north of Australia, we've got Malaysia, Indonesia, and then just below the equator, but still north of Australia, we've got Papua New Guinea. Now, if we zoom in a little bit closer, you can see that a little bit clearer. You can start to see Tasmania in a bit more detail, and you can start to see these different parts of Australia as a whole. So if we zoom in a little bit more, you can see how Australia is split up into these 8 different states or 8 different territories within the country. So you've got places like Queensland, which you might have heard of before. You've got Tasmania, Victoria, lots of different places. Now, as I mentioned earlier, if we look at this satellite image, you can see around the outside, around the coast, where the majority of the cities in Australia are, it's slightly greener, slightly more lush. Now that's why the population isn't very big. That's why the population is around 25 million rather than substantially larger due to the size of the island. It's because of this central area where it's a lot of desert, where it's quite difficult to live. Now it also ties into historical reasons as well, and that's not to say that people don't live in the middle of Australia, it's just to say that the majority live near the coast. Now we'll come back to that in a few lessons time, looking at the history and looking at the context in a little bit more detail. So what I want you to do, using the information that we've just already looked at and we've just covered, and these two maps that you can see on the screen in front of you, I want you to write your own description of Australia's location. Now I want you to try and use the keywords, so that's Southwest, Tropic of Capricorn, Equator, Pacific Ocean and Indian Ocean. I want you to try and use those bits of information in your short description. Should be about 3 or 4 sentences. You can talk about the relation to other countries, you can talk about the hemisphere it's in, anything that you think might be useful. So if you want to pause the video now and have a go at completing that. Okay, so you should have managed to have a go at answering that question and where Australia is located. So just to check if you've been paying attention, without going back into the video, what I want you to do is I want you to answer these 5 questions on the screen in front of you. So number 1, is Australia in the northern or southern hemisphere? Number 2, what is the capital of Australia? Number 3, what is the GDP per capita of Australia? Number 4, which ocean is to the west of Australia? Number 5, what is the name of the country to the southeast of Australia? If you get those done, there's a star challenge there on the screen as well. So we haven't mentioned it, but I still want you to have a go at answering it. So what was the large event that happened in Australia in 2000? Now, if you just want to pause the video here and have a go at answering those questions. Okay, so hopefully you've had enough time to answer those questions. So what we've done already, so we've described the location of Australia using maps, a bit of Google Earth. What we're going to do now is progress step 2, and we're going to explore the physical and human geography of Australia. So just as a recap, just to connect to what I've already mentioned from the maps earlier. So Australia is made up of 8 states or regions, each with a range of different physical or human geographical features. Now we'll come back to this in the next lesson when we'll look at the biomes within Australia. So on the piece of paper or your book, if you've got your book in front of you, I want you to create a small table. So on one side, put physical geography, on the other side, put human geography. So I'm going to talk through some features of Australia, and I want you to put the information into the correct column. So whether you think it's physical geography or whether you think it's human geography. Now I want you to add some detail to that. So not just the name of the place, I want you to give a bit more information than that because you'll need it for the task that we'll complete at the end. So remember, physical geography are things that are created by nature, so for example rivers or mountains, and then human geography are things that are man-made, cities, roads or statues. So if you just want to pause the video here, you can do, and you can draw your table out, but I'm going to move on straight away and move on to the different features. So first one, Cradle Mountain. So Cradle Mountain is located in the Central Highlands region of Tasmania. So that's the little island that's off the south of Australia. It is one of the main tourist attractions in Tasmania, and visitors can hike up the mountain or stay around the base in cabins and watch wildlife. So Cradle Mountain is situated in the Cradle Mountain Lake St Clair National Park and is part of the Tasmanian Wilderness World Heritage Area. Now, World Heritage will come up quite a few times because there's quite a few sites within Australia that are protected and that are looked after by this World Heritage Organisation. Next one, Cape Byron Lighthouse. So Cape Byron is the most eastern part of the Australian mainland. So that's the place that the lighthouse is found. So the Cape Byron Lighthouse was named after the bay that it is next to, which was given its name by Captain James Cook in 1770. The lighthouse was built in 1901 and is known as one of the strongest lights in Australia. Next one up, so you've probably heard of this one before. So this is the Great Barrier Reef. So the Great Barrier Reef is a World Heritage Site, again, located off Queensland's coast and is the world's largest coral reef system, stretching over 2,000 kilometres. So it has a massive amount of species, so lots of different fish, sharks, whales, dolphins, and so on within the area. So it's quite a diverse wildlife area. Visitors can swim, snorkel, dive and sail around the reef as long as you've got permission to be there. Now, there's quite strict restrictions in place for the Great Barrier Reef to make sure it's protected, and as I'm sure you're aware, climate change is currently affecting the Great Barrier Reef and is currently damaging the Great Barrier Reef. So next one is the 12 Apostles. So the 12 Apostles are located off the coast of Port Campbell National Park in Victoria. The 12 Apostles are a collection of limestone stacks that have become a popular tourist site due to the proximity, so the closeness to each other. So only 8 of the 12 still stand, and that's down to coastal erosion and subaerial processes and harsh weather conditions that have caused them to collapse. Next up is the Sydney Opera House. So the Sydney Opera House is in Sydney, obviously, which is located in a part of Australia called New South Wales. It's one of the most famous buildings in the world, and parts of the building look like sails of a ship. The Sydney Opera House hosts a range of different musical performances and plays a part in the New Year's celebrations for Australia. Next one, we've got Canberra. So Canberra is the capital city of Australia and is found within the Australian Capital Territory. Canberra is known for its fantastic festivals, including the famous Florade, which is a celebration of the city's many spring blooms. Around 400,000 people live in the city of Canberra. Next one is Uluru. So Uluru is located in the Northern Territory and is one of Australia's most famous and recognisable landmarks, and again is listed as a World Heritage Site. It is the largest monolith, so a large single upright block of stone in the world. So Uluru is the Aboriginal name for the monolith, but it's also known as Ayers Rock. So Sir Henry Ayres was the 8th Premier of South Australia, and that's why it's been given that name as well. Ballarat is our next one. So Ballarat is about 100 kilometres away from Melbourne, and it is one of the most significant towns from the Victorian era. So it was a small sheep station, and it discovered gold in 1851. By 1858, it was known as the Golden City. The biggest gold nugget that they found in the area was valued to be around $3 million. So now you can go and visit the Gold Museum, and you can take a ride around the Tramway Museum. So what I want you to do, just to add to all of that, hopefully you paused after every one and added it to your table. I want you to use the internet and add 2 more physical and human geographical features to the table. So remember, human and man-made, physical are things that are there naturally, and it has to be about Australia. There can be any facts, but just make sure it's got a bit of information to it. If you get that done and want to challenge yourself, try and go back through your human and physical features and try and categorize them in a slightly different way. If you want to pause the video now, you can go and have a look on the internet to add to what you've already got. So hopefully you've managed to add a couple more things to your table and a couple more facts to the information that you have got. So next progress check, so progress check 2 is a true or false. What I want you to do is I want you to go through the statements and say whether they are true or false. So write them out in the piece of paper or your book if you've got your book and say whether they're true or false. So first one, Australia is the 6th largest country in the world. Second one, Australia is made up of the 9 regions, including Queensland and Victoria. Uluru is a monolith, which is a large single mountain. Number 4, Ballarat is known for its discovery of gold during the reign of Henry VIII. And 5, Australia has a population of 52 million people. Again, star challenge. If you think some of them are false, I want you to correct them to make sure that they actually are true and you've got true facts written down. So if you pause the video, have a go at that. So you should have managed to do your true or false and hopefully correct them if they were false. So what we've done already is progress step 1 and progress step 2. What we're going to do now is demonstrate some understanding of the geography of Australia. So what you need to do is you need to choose one of the following tasks to demonstrate your learning and make sure you email your work after you've finished. So tough is create a travel guide for Australia focusing on its location, either the physical or human geography of the area. Tougher, write a couple of paragraphs explaining why people should visit Australia, including its location and physical and human geography. Toughest, to evaluate the importance of Australia to the wider world. Think about why the physical and human geography may or may not be useful, and then a star challenge there as well. So if you pause the video now, have a go at one of those tasks, and remember you must email it to your teacher once you are complete. Okay, so hopefully you've managed to complete one of those tasks. So we've done all our progress steps, which is fantastic. Last thing I want you to do is a 3-2-1 plenary. So 3 facts from this lesson, 2 keywords you've used, and 1 question that you still have, and write those down. So if you pause the video now and get those down. So just finally, remind you to send your work to your teachers, and here are the last answers.